Hello and welcome to the second video in my Emma Tries series. And in this video series, I am trying a range of different e-learning authoring tools and providing an unbiased and fair review of each tool, talking about the features, the functionality, and who they would be best suited for. So in video one, I covered Chameleon Creator, and today we are going to be looking at Yo Scenario. So when Yo Scenario reached out to me and asked if I'd like to give their tool a go, it was a resounding yes. I absolutely love scenario-based learning. All of my e-learnings have scenarios in. So I was super duper excited about this. And as we can see from their website, their tool is designed for scenario learning experiences. Now, what I love about this one is firstly that it is incredibly reasonable in terms of pricing. So we'll come up to the features in a second, and then obviously we'll jump into the authoring tool. But their pricing plans are just really affordable. And as a freelancer, this is really important. Subscriptions can add up and can be really expensive. So their pro account from £15 a month is incredibly good value for money and is something that is affordable or could be affordable to a lot of freelancers as well if they wanted to use this tool. So that's the first thing I kind of wanted to highlight. They do also have a free plan that you can use to kind of try everything out before you buy, like most people do. So from this, you can see they kind of market this tool as being able to create sort of games, videos, branching scenarios, quizzes, activities, all of that kind of stuff. And you can then export your scenarios or your activity or whatever it is to your LMS. You can export it as a SCORM, a web, the usual things. So here we are in Yo Scenario's dashboard, and I really like how clean and minimalistic this is. It's very easy to see kind of what we're currently working on, adding a new scenario, and kind of the level of storage we've got left. So the differences between their kind of light account and their pro account is the amount of storage you get, so the amount of scenarios you can create essentially. And you can see that I've obviously been given a pro account, so I've got slightly more to work with. You can also see the number of plays, and this I think is linked to if you are kind of got your course on an LMS, you can see how many people have played it and interacted with your course. We've also got media, so this is like a media library. You can upload assets and kind of pre-do this before you even get into building a scenario. So if you've got loads of branding, for example, like logos and things like that, you could sort of pre-upload all of this before you start creating anything, just to save time, I guess. Okay, and we've got like our help and everything in account settings. So let's go into my test scenario, and to do this you just hover over and you click your manage button. You can also archive things, so if you've got any outdated courses, duplicate them and delete. So all pretty usual functionality there. So when you get into your kind of scenario space here, you've got your little thumbnails, and these are essentially like slides. And I will preface this by saying I was pleasantly surprised with how you move about and kind of create these scenarios. When before I got into the tool, I was actually kind of thinking it was going to be a little bit like PowerPoint and function very similarly to that kind of creation of slides, I suppose. So I really like this view, and I love the fact that you've got these arrows here which show your branching. And you can move these around as well. So it looks, reminds me a little bit like Miro. You've got a very fluid space here, and you can actually change this as well. So they've got a range of tools down here, and you can change like the size of your thumbnails. You can zoom in and out. You can like reset all of your settings. You can auto arrange things as well. Find your start step. And here you can see step view. So I've got it as, I think, tree, but you could change it to list. So it's a bit more like a timeline there. Natural, which is what we had it on, sorry. Tree, which is kind of like this. And I like this preview as well. It makes it super clear to see where everything's branching off. So if you are doing a branching scenario, for visual people like me, this is fantastic. And I love this view. And this is kind of how I would brainstorm things if I was using Miro as well. So I'm just going to jump back to the natural view a minute. So what I would say is this tool takes a while to get used to. So you can see I've not created many slides, and I will jump off, do a bit more, and then show you what I've done at the end of this video. But it takes a bit of getting used to all the functions. There is a lot of functionality within this tool, which is great. But for a beginner, if you are somebody that's very new to e-learning, or new to just using all three tools in general, this might not be a starting point for you. Or allow yourself lots of time to play first and to get used to things and where things are. Because I'll be honest, I looked at this and was quite overwhelmed. Obviously, it's very icon based, and you do get a little help bubble every time you kind of hover over an icon telling you what each thing means. But I found I kept forgetting. So while I was trying to edit stuff, I kept forgetting what all of these icons meant, and having to re-hover over them or click them to figure it out. So it's not the most user-friendly, in my opinion. This interface with the slides, really good. The icons just take a bit of getting used to. So it's not something you can jump into, I don't think, and just know very quickly. It takes a while. You'll have to ease yourself into it. And eventually you pick up the habits of obviously knowing what all of this means. I'd also say when you switch between views, you'll notice that there was an add step button down the bottom, and that actually disappears. And it took me so long to figure out how to add a new step, because what I'd done is moved from this view into, say, tree view, and it disappeared. And I could not figure out for ages how to then add another step. And it's only when I switched back the views and it reappeared. So this is kind of what I mean by it's got its little quirks, and it's not the most obviously user-friendly. So let's just jump into my introduction slide, and we'll have a look at the kind of functionality that you get with this. So you get a blank slide space to begin with, and you might not be able to see, if I move this image out of the way, you can see we get this like dotted line, which indicates your space essentially. So what the learner will see when you preview. And there is settings to turn this on and off, whether you want this grid, whether you don't, whether you want the dotted line, whether you don't. So there is a lot of things that you can change and amend and do with this. So if I click on a text box, for example, you'll see what I mean. So adding things and creating the slides is really easy. You just choose kind of what block you want. So if I wanted an image on here, you can then select your image and it would add it in, and you've got the freedom to just move it around the space, which is great. You can add things like cropping it and changing the filters and all that stuff as well. But yeah, the freedom to actually build the slides and move things around, I really like. You can also hide things as well, so almost creating layers and choosing kind of like the positioning and everything. But another way in which I think this tool is slightly more complex than maybe a beginner level is that we have got a lot of different settings, and this is just for one element. And it took me so long to find the delete button as well, because if I press delete on my keyboard, nothing happens, which in some ways is good because you can't accidentally delete things. But to delete, you've actually got to scroll all the way down here and press the delete button, and it will ask you if you're sure, which again, I like because it means you're not accidentally deleting things. But that wasn't completely obvious to me. So when I selected one of my elements, the delete button's not obvious. It doesn't pop up anywhere. So again, I had to play around to be able to find that. So we have, in terms of level of functionality and interactivity, we have got a lot of options, which is fantastic, and a lot of options for customization. But the kind of functions or the things that you need the most aren't inherently obvious, which can make the process slightly longer. Okay, so if I had a text box, I'll kind of show you the sort of things that you can do. So even with text, you can obviously change the name and change the actual text within your box. You can make things draggable. So if you're creating custom activities or you want the learner to move stuff around the screen, you can add interactivity. So if you want like a pop-up window to appear when the learner clicks on this or hovers over it, obviously you can change all of your font and text color as well, and add animations in. So they've got a range of quite a few animations actually. So I love the way they've categorized these attention seekers. I love that sort of bouncing entrances. So you can really fully animate your slides as well and choose obviously in, during and out. Adding hover effects, styles. So if you wanted it as like a speech bubble instead, so if you've got characters. So as you can see, I won't go through all of these settings, but as you can see, you get a lot of customization options. You can literally get it to look and do exactly what you want. And you can even add custom CSS, for each element as well. So you could really, if you knew what you were doing with HTML or JavaScript, you could really get this very, very specific to how you want it to look. So let's go over some of the functionality that you get with Yoast Scenario. And if I jump into our editor here, you can see that you get a really good range of functionality to add and interactivity. So we've got quizzes, we've got tables, chat, which I'll come on to in a minute because I love this feature. It's really nice. We've got download, so if you wanted to link sort of external resources like PDFs, buttons, you can freehand draw, you can add icons, shapes, choices, which I'll talk about in a second, and kind of the usual things like text and image. You can also, they've got a very small library of blocks or pre-done blocks at the moment, but you can actually save your own that you can use like repeatedly across your course. So if you've got a specific text style that you like, or you sort of pre-formatted something like this and you want it across multiple steps or slides, then you can save it as a kind of template block. So this is the choices function. And this one, I've used it kind of like a landing page here. And this is great for creating those really detailed kind of branching scenarios. So here the learner or the user would select a scenario and it would take them to that scenario to do. So they've got the option of choosing between three. But you could also use this function within activities. So if you're creating a branching scenario, for example, where their decisions lead them to a different outcome, then this is great because you can add the choices in and you can choose for it to, give feedback if you wanted kind of like live instant feedback, or you could just choose it that it will take them somewhere else. And so you can create these really kind of detailed, in-depth branching scenarios, which are great for things like kind of healthcare, if you're doing kind of compliance e-learning, and just to kind of add that tangible element to your e-learnings as well. And it's super easy to edit these. You can add a new choice here by selecting the plus button, and then the three dots, you can either rearrange things and you can edit them. So you can see I've added the name for this one, chosen an icon, you can add a picture, and where you want the learner to go or the user to go when they select this particular button. You can also add conditions. So if you're familiar with variables and conditions within something like Storyline, a condition is essentially the learner will be able to do something when something else has happened. So as a result of something. So for example, you could have it so that it hides this scenario when they have completed it. So if they come back to this menu after they've done scenario one, it would be hidden, for example. So there's the option to add in and create variables as well, which again is why I think this isn't necessarily a super beginner friendly tool. To get the most out of it, obviously anybody could pick this up and have a go with it. But I think if you're going to use it to its full capacity, it's not something you would sort of jump into as a beginner and suddenly be able to do it. It takes a while. You'd need an understanding of things like variables and conditions and triggers to be able to really stretch this and get the most out of it. So that's one of the interactions that I really like. The next is the chat function here. So if I jump back into my little step preview, you can see I've got a help slide. So if I select that one, and we've got this kind of messenger style interaction. And this is almost like an AI chatbot, I suppose. So if I preview this, you'll see what I mean. If I go to preview, and just while it's on this weird kind of very zoomed view here, I'll highlight that when you preview a slide, you can change the screen size. So if we put it into responsive, you can see it now shrinks to fit my browser window. And you can also switch between like tablet and mobile. Now, obviously, for Gone Mobile, it looks a bit dodgy. There is a function where you can get an overlay so that if they open it on mobile in kind of portrait view, it would ask them to turn their phone around. So if you wanted them to only view it in landscape, then it'll prompt them and they will have to turn their phone around to be able to view it. So that's a nice feature as well. Okay, I've just closed the preview there. So here we have this sort of chat function, and you can see it's set up very much like a kind of WhatsApp style customer support chat type thing. If I click on write message, it actually gives me the option of a message, and I select that, and then our support assistant there, Jenna, she thinks about an answer and then provides one, and then we do the same and she provides one. And what I'll point out as well is this time here is actually accurate. I'm recording this at 2:15 in the afternoon. So it's actually using kind of like live times as well, which makes it feel more real. And I really like that. It adds to that realism aspect that you're actually talking to somebody. So as you can see, I've pre-programmed in these questions and then Jenna answers. And I've used this for navigation help or for support in using the e-learning, but this has just so many possibilities with it. And it's so quick and easy to set up. Doing something like this in Storyline would be quite a lot of kind of layers and setup and conditions and triggers and all of that kind of thing. Whereas this was so easy, and I'll show you in a minute. But you could use this for like simulating customer service training, for sort of simulating conversations with colleagues and dealing with conflict and communication and things like that. So this is just fantastic. I love it. I think it's a great feature. And then you can choose to end the chat and it would take you back to a specific slide if you wanted to. So I could have that set to jump back to whatever slide the learner was on previously. So if I select this one, you can see we click Manage Conversations. And this is what they call chat stems. So it's a question and answer block, essentially. And you can choose what happens when they choose a specific question or answer. So if I go test and just do test and click save, you can see it then adds another option here. And you could go down and down and down with this. So if they choose that answer, they get that answer. If they chose this answer, we could then add a stem to this one, which would, ignore my terrible typing, would give them that. So you, it's like, again, this kind of action and consequence style. So if you're using this for customer service training, for example, you could have this bit as say, something a customer has said, and then you'd have to choose the appropriate response. And again, it's that consequence to their decision making, which just makes this feel so much more tangible in terms of creating e-learning that is relevant to people. So again, really nice feature of this one. And you can just keep adding steps, building things out. So I've got a blank scenario sort of, or page, I suppose, here. And you can add your buttons in, you can add choices in. So I could decorate the slide with shapes and with quizzes. So we've got like a multiple choice quiz style thing here where they got to choose the correct answer. And again, you can manage your questions, which ones are correct, choose your feedback, all of that kind of stuff. So the level of customization that you've got here, I mean, you can't fault it. You can literally change and amend pretty much everything. So really make this specific to your needs. And what I like about this is it has possibilities beyond e-learning as well. So I know on their website, they talk about using it for marketing, and it could be a really good tool for creating kind of even things like interactive portfolios. I'd love to have a go at potentially translating my website into something like this and doing like an interactive kind of portfolio activity where they can choose various parts of my work and view it and that kind of thing. It doesn't have to just be limited to e-learning. And you can publish this sort of as usual, so score and web, that kind of thing. And you could either have this as a standalone e-learning. So if you are doing this an e-learning that is purely focused around this scenario activity, you could build out and create a 30-minute e-learning easily through this if you've got 3 branched scenarios. Alternatively, you could use this as a step or a piece of the puzzle. So on your learning management system, if you've got, say, a 5-minute introductory knowledge-based e-learning, you could then jump into Yo scenario, create the activity for sort of to support the knowledge-based e-learning, and then follow it up with like downloadable resources separately again. So it doesn't have to be a huge thing. You don't have to use this to create a full e-learning. You could just use this for the activity part. And that would allow you then to track their understanding, I suppose, of any content, because if they are failing this activity, then you'd be able to report specifically on that as opposed to maybe like a whole e-learning. Before we wrap things up, because I am quite conscious that I have been talking for ages, I just want to go over this kind of publishing and analytics section. So to publish your course, you just press the little button here and you can choose to publish a new version. But I've also got a version on the go. So if you click existing versions, you'll see your versions of this particular scenario. And you can update the version by pressing the button here, update to latest. And this is your shareable link. So you can actually send this to people and they'll be able to do your e-learning. I tested it on my phone. I emailed it to myself and it works. And this is really useful, particularly just sort of circling back to this idea of me kind of potentially sending it out as like a portfolio piece, is that you don't need any hosting site for it. So I could just send that link out and people would be able to access it without having to like embed it anywhere. So I like that. That's, again, where we see that this could be useful outside of the realms of e-learning, that, if you don't always need to track everything, it's a good platform for sharing information. And you can export to SCORM, your API, and embed as well, and HTML. So if you are obviously embedding this in an LMS and you need the SCORM version, then it's super simple to do that too. Okay, so at the end of every single one of these videos, I am scoring the authoring tool on 4 categories, and that is ease of use, functionality, customization, and skill level. So kicking off with ease of use, and I probably have to give this a 2.5, and that seems really harsh, I know, but it isn't the most user-friendly or intuitive platform. And I get that this is probably slightly biased because of my own skill level, but when I first went into the space and started trying to use the tools, it wasn't the quickest to pick up. The icons down the side weren't super obvious as to what they were pointing you to. And it did take a lot of me clicking things to eventually kind of figure out what stuff did. And that is why I kind of haven't built out this massive scenario activity to show you, in that I spent a lot of the time just trying to figure things out. And there's a lot of buttons which all do different things. So yeah, it's not a simple authoring tool, that's for sure, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think it's one of the ones you would need to go in, you would need to play with it first before using it for any kind of like project, really. It's not the kind of authoring tool that if a client came to you and said, oh, could you just jump in Yo scenario and build this e-learning for me? It's not that simple. You need that time to get used to it first, in my opinion anyway. Like I said, I'm trying to make this as unbiased as possible, and I'm sure there would be people out there that are incredibly tech-minded and might jump into this and go, what are you talking about? It's great, I love it. But from somebody that has used a lot of authoring tools and uses them on a daily basis, I would say, yeah. And to be honest, I would rate Storyline exactly the same, because that is another example of a tool that you cannot just jump into without knowing what you're doing. So next is functionality, and I'd have to score it at a 4. You get such a good range of functionality here. This kind of links into that ease of use thing, that you've got so much functionality that it does sort of push down that ease of use aspect. But things like the chat interactive element or component, fantastic. That's got so many possibilities to it. I love that. And recreating something like that in a tool like, for example, Storyline would be so time consuming. Whereas here we can do it with a click of a button, and it's super quick to set up. The same with the kind of branching choices component as well. That is really easy to set up, and you've got so many options in terms of how you can use it. So I love the flexibility with this software. Although it is marketed obviously as an e-learning tool, you could use it for so many other things, and it feels very multi-purpose, which I love. And I think the functionality supports that. You've got obviously the analytics, the publishing, all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, definitely a 4 for this one. For customization, again, I'd probably have to go for a 4. And as with functionality, I would say that it does detract that ease of use, because you've got so much customization options that it also links to why you need those couple of days to just play with things and to set things up. Setting a course up, you'd probably need a good couple of hours just to get your fonts in place and your colors and your branding and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, but the level of customization is excellent. You can animate things. There's a good range of animations. You can change like hover states and colors and buttons, and yeah, you can't fault the amount in which you can make this feel like your own. So definitely a 4 for customization as well. And finally, skill level, and I'd have to sit this at intermediate. And that's not to say that beginners couldn't use it. I mean, obviously anybody could download this and pick it up within probably a few days and be able to create good things. But I think because of the level of functionality and the level of customization, you need to be familiar with either a similar tool or just kind of putting e-learnings together in general to really get the most of this e-learning tool, and to for the setting up of it to not detract or take too long as well, because you don't want to be, if you're doing this as a live client project and using the software, you don't want to be factoring in 2 days, for example, just to set the course up. You need that build time to be getting in there. I would also say that this kind of tool requires a lot of pre-planning. So you need to be really thinking about what is going to be in it before you start building, which is obviously the same for every e-learning tool. But I think this specifically, backtracking, so if you do something wrong or you really want to make a drastic change, is not easy. And if you've got all of these branches everywhere, these connecting steps or slides, taking one out or amending one or changing the branching is not a simple task. So you kind of need to know what you're doing. And I think it's best suited to a slightly more experienced developer that maybe has been in that situation or has used similar tools or has used other e-learning tools before. And also working with an ID as well, in sort of following on from that planning aspect. If you are not an instructional designer, but you just do the development, then I think in order to use this, you need to have that kind of slight understanding of working with IDs and having done complex scenarios before, to be able to picture how things are moving together and linking together and seeing the bigger picture. Which again, I don't want to say that a beginner developer couldn't do this, but I think this kind of program requires that little bit more experience within this kind of role. Just to be able to get the most out of it. I mean, obviously, like I covered at the beginning, it's a super cheap and affordable tool. But I mean, even just me doing this video, I don't think I got even a fraction enough of kind of what it can do. So yeah, I think to really make it shine and to really make it worth its money, it was best suited to an minimum intermediate developer. And there we go. That is the end of that. I will link Yo Scenario's website into the description, and I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you are enjoying the series so far, do let me know, and you can jump back to my channel to also watch Chameleon's video too. And I will see you next month with a brand new one.